Hello everyone, in this session let's see how to use Execute SQL Task in various use case scenarios. So let's open Visual Studio and create new project, SSIS practice, pause and create. So now let's go to SSIS toolbox and drag Execute SQL Task. Now double click on the task, go to connections. Here we have more connections, right? So I would like to use OLEDB because I want to connect to SQL Server instance. So I'm going to connection, new connection. Now creating new connection, and my server name is localhost, and I'm selecting my database name. So I want to select master because I want to create a database in my server. So let's click on test connection. So test succeeded, that means our connection is successful. So and click OK, and then go to, so now I would like to enter direct text in the SQL statement rather file connection or variable. So that's why I'm going to SQL statement directly and entering my create database command, create database, and database name as SSIS practice. So and then I am entering go, and then I want to create a table as well in the server database SSIS practice. So to create a table within the database, we have to choose the database first, right? So let's choose the database, and then like it will be exactly like the way we write SQL statements in SSMS. So the commands that we write in SSMS, we have to just copy that into this SQL query editor. So it will run in the way it executes in SSMS. So let's create a sample table as well here. dbo dot sample table of id begin, comma, name, and varchar of 200, and then OK. And I also want to insert a record into this table. Okay, insert into dbo dot sample table of id, comma, name, values of 1, comma, what be projects. Okay, and then that's all I wanted to do with this Execute SQL task now. So we use this Execute SQL task for various scenarios, like what if we want to execute a SQL dynamically, or to automate purpose, or to integrate. So whichever way, if it is a SQL related task, then we have to choose Execute SQL task. So let's click on OK now, and click OK and execute. When we execute, it actually do open a connection to our SQL server, and it will just copy our entered SQL statements into their editor, their runtime engine, and execute like it executes in SSMS. So executed successfully. Let's go to progress part to verify the progress. So create database SSIS practice has completed, and everything is completed. We are not seeing any errors in progress, right? So Let's go to SSMS and check whether the database has created or not. So here is the database SSIS practice we created, and the tables. So table is a sample table, and then select top. So record also inserted into this table, right? So this is how the basic scenario to use Execute SQL Task. So you got an idea, right? So basic SSIS. Now, so I will rename it as basic SQL Task. So now let's take another example for Execute SQL Task. Now let's drag again and let's open now. And now again I want to use OLEDB connection because I want to make connection to SQL Server, and go to connection, and I would like to select a database we just created. I want to select SSIS practice database instead of this master. So I'm going to create a new connection and going to create a local host, and then select SSIS practice and test and click OK. And then here, instead of selecting direct input, I want to select file connection this time. So let's see. So in the file connection, what I want to, so let's create a file before we make the connection to the file connection, because a file should already exist before we use this file connection, because actually what we are trying to map here is we have, let's assume we have a query in a file, or we have some set of records to be inserted in a file. So we want to insert query, we want to execute the query by reading the file. So it reads the file at the time of runtime, and it executes the commands that we have in that flat file. So this is how it works. So let's make a connection to the file connection, and before, let's prepare a file connection. Now let's go to source files, and let's create a text file for SQL insert files. Let's create a text file here. Text file insert sample table record. So let's insert some records into sample table. Okay, let's open this, and let's write queries here. Insert into sample table we just created, and before I have to use our database name, right? So use SSIS practice is our database name. Go and then insert into dbo dot sample table of id comma name values of 2 comma some John, name John. Okay, like I want to insert another record. Insert into dbo dot sample table of id comma name values of 3 comma some Raj. Okay, and go. And remember, go is not mandatory here. If you want, you can remove this, but if the advantage with go is if you want to insert the record even though the previous statement has failed, then you have to enter go. If you don't want to insert the next line of the record, if there is an error in the previous line, then you have to use go. Okay, so this is how I created. Let's execute this one. Okay, so let's map the file to that location. Now let's copy the source file path, and now go to file connection and create a new connection, and then browse, and then go to our project, select OK. So I've mapped our file connection here, and then click OK. So the text file connection has been created. Remember, all the connections that I'm creating can be managed in the connection managers. So like if you want to change the connection here for the Execute SQL task, no need to go to Execute SQL task. We just need to go to here and we can change here. Okay, now let's execute SQL task. I want to execute only the task, not the package. So to execute the task, we just need to right click on the Execute SQL task, individual task, and then go to execute task. So executed successfully. Go to progress and see what happens. So it executed successfully without any warnings or messages. Okay, so now let's stop it and let's go to SSIS database and execute again. So see, all the records are available in the table. So this is another use case we can use with Execute SQL task. Let's rename the task as file connection use in SQL task. Okay, now let's go to another use case, Execute SQL task. Now double click again. Now let's define the connection again. I want to choose the existing connection SSIS practice, and then go to SQL statement, and then go to SQL source and variable. Let's try with variable now. So just like we create connection to a SQL flat file connection, we now read text from variable and it executes the variable value at runtime. So let's define a variable before we do this. Okay, now right click on the designer and click variables here, and go to new variable and give here SQL query. Okay, and now data type as string, because string data type, right? So let's now enter some more records here. Value, I am directly entering value here. Insert into dbo dot sample table of id comma name values of 4 comma. Now this is a SQL query, right? Let me note it as SQL query here. Okay, so I want to enter only this one statement, and we can also use expression to formulate this SQL query dynamically. Okay, so I will explain this later. Okay, So now I've created, and remember I am not using a use database name before the SQL statement in the statement here, because our connection is directly pointing to SSIS practice database which I want. So no need to use database name if the connection is already pointing to the database name. If you want to use the different database than the connection in the same server, then you have to use database name and then SQL statement that you want to execute. Okay. Now click close and open again and select the variable just we created, SQL query, and then click OK. Now execute this. Executed successfully. So let's go to progress and see there are any warning messages or any error messages. No, and of course the green indicates all success. Okay, now click stop it and go to our query and execute. See, the record has been inserted. So let's rename it again to variable use in SQL task. Okay, now let's see another use case. Execute SQL task again, and then let's open execute SQL task again, and so connection again. So I want to use same connection. So we used all these SQL source types, right? So okay, now let's see how to map the result set of the query into parameter mapping. Okay, or okay, let's first try result set property. Okay, so let's try to use result set now. So if I want to store the result of the SQL query in an object variable, then we need to use result set property here. Okay, now let's try to use that. Now in this query, what I want to do is I want to return a value. So like sample db, let's select this one here. Let's copy this SQL query and paste it here. So I want to store this result set into a variable. So I want to store the whole complete result set of the query into a variable. So click OK. And so in order to store this result set into a variable, we have to choose the property result set and go to single row, full result set, or XML. So because the query returns multiple records, full result set, right? So it's not returning only one row, so it's returning full result set. So I need to choose full result set. So we have to choose full result set in this case scenario. And then when we select this full result set, we have to map that to a particular variable. Then only it stores the values into a variable or into a file, right? So to map that full result set into a variable, we have a section here, result set section, and then go to add and result set name, because we are returning the query returns the full result set. It's not returns a single row or single cell data. So that's why we have to use 0 here, result set name, because it's returning full result set. And then store it in a variable. Let's create a new variable to store this, and I will call it as SQL result. Okay, and user namespace value type as object, because full result set. Okay, click OK and then OK and execute now. executed. Now let's go back to the sorry. Okay, so now how to see the data we have, the data has been saved in the variable or not. So if you don't see any errors when we map in this way, that means it definitely stores the data in SQL result variable. Okay. Okay, now let's go to another use case. Let's tag execute SQL task again and open, go to connection. I'm selecting my existing connection again, and now select. Now I want to store only single row. Let's see, to store only single row in a result set. Sometimes we need to store only the top one record or only the top value from the SQL query into a variable. Then we have to use a single row. So now select our query again and copy and paste here, and let's use top one here, ID and name, and click OK. Now select top row, single row, and go to result again and enter here. So because it's a single row, we can actually now map into two different variables. So one is ID, the first one is ID, right? And the second one is name. So here, so the first one, so create new variable for ID, and because it's a integer, I want to store it as a integer. So that is int 64. Because that's a big int, we have to select the appropriate integer here. If our integer in SQL Server is integer rather big int, then you need to choose int 32. So we have to choose the correct version here, otherwise it will give an error. So I'm selecting int 64, that's related to big int. So now click. What's happened? We must be specified for the selected variable type. Yes. Okay, now 0. So because that's an integer, we have to choose the value as 0 and click OK. And now again go to name and select name variable here, and now value, no need to enter any value because it's a string. It will store a blank value in that value, right? Set string. Click OK. So we mapped the first two columns into result set two variables. Let's click on OK and now execute this. Executed successfully. So this is how we map full single row. Or let's say let me single row and then right. Okay, so this is how we do single row mapping. Now let's go to another example. Execute SQL task again and double click. Connection. Now let's see how to use XML data type. Okay, so let me okay, so let's prepare our query first to an XML data type. So to generate it as an XML format, the function that we have here is select star from for XML auto. So it automatically generates an XML type. See? Okay, so let's go back to query and copy this query into this here. So now it's returning in XML format, correct? So now let's click on OK and now result set, select XML type, and now go to result set and add and enter. So here let's name it as okay, that's fine. Now go to here and let's select 0 and select a new variable, and here select string, because the value that it returns will be stored as a string value in variable. Okay, now click OK and then click OK. Now execute. Executed successfully. So this is how we map an XML data type to a variable. Now rename it to XML data mapping. Now let's go to another use case, execute SQL task again. Now go to OLEDB again and select this one, SQL statement. So what I want to do in this execute SQL task now, so I want to map the variables to a SQL query, parameter mapping. That means, so I want to execute SQL statement based on the parameters that we pass, like select star from table where ID equal to 1, ID equal to 2. So that ID and values will be mapped using parameter mapping. Like we pass parameters to a stored procedure or any dynamic SQL, here we have to declare that parameter mapping to a SQL query. So how do we prepare that parameter mapping? So before we going to create a SQL statement, first we have to make sure what connection type we are using for a parameter mapping. So if we use the connection type as OLEDB, we have to follow one syntax. If we use another connection like ADO.NET, then we have to follow a syntax related to ADO.NET. So let's check what syntax we have to follow for OLEDB. Okay, now SQL statement, go to query, now select ID comma name from dbo.sample table where ID equal to question mark. So if we use a OLEDB connection, then we have to use question mark to pass parameter mapping, to map parameter mapping to this variable ID value. Okay, now if you want to use ADO.NET connection, then you have to specify the variable name here instead of question mark. Okay, then click OK and go to parameters and click add and enter any value here. So I want to use user ID column here because that's an integer and we defined it before. So parameter name is ID and parameter value is anything, so 0. Okay, so this is the parameter size. It actually not applicable to integer data type, so that's why we can use any size, like you can use 10 or 5, whatever you want, but that doesn't matter because it's an integer type. It is applicable to only string data types. Okay, sorry, here we have to choose 0 because, so this is our first variable mapping, right? So we have to define the order here. It's not the actual parameter name, it's the order of the parameter. So because we have in our case now we have only mapped one parameter, right? So the that which is first one, so that one should be mapped as 0. So because it starts from 0, we have to choose the first parameter mapping as first 0 mapping. Okay, so this is how we have to map. and click OK. Now execute. Executed. So this is how we map a parameter to a query. So let's use two parameters now, and name equal to question mark. So both are input parameters, right? So that's why we have to choose input when we map parameter. So let's click on OK. Now go to parameter mapping, and the previous value is an input, so that's why I selected direction as input. And now select our new value here, name, and this is also an input. So if you have output or return value, then you have to choose output or input. So now it's a string type, right? So here we have to choose an varchar or varchar based on whichever data type you have. And here it's a 1, right? So it's because it's a second parameter mapping. The first one, it starts from the left to right, it's not start from right to left. So the direction of parameter mapping is left to right. So the first value is our first left and the second left. And now choose the data den varchar size. So name I want to give 200. So now click on OK. So now execute this. Executed. So now let's go to execution results again. So choose. So this is how the query will be prepared at runtime. So it actually, the question mark will be mapped with the first value. If the variable has the value of 1, then it maps with 1. So that's how it mapped. It runs at execution time. So this is how. So this is one use case scenario that we use sometimes when we need to execute for each member or for each country, state, something. So based on our requirement, there will be many use cases in this case scenario. So this is parameter mapping. Now let's go to Execute SQL Task again. Now, now double click. Now choose connection type, SSIS practice again, and now go to SQL statement. Okay, before we go to SQL statement, so what we want to do now? So I want to map expression variables into the SQL statement. Okay, so let's use expression. So in the SQL statement, now let's go to expressions. Here property, SQL statement source. Okay, now select SQL statement source and now go to expression. Now here you can actually use any variable you want, like we use direct variable in the variable. You can also use variable here like this. So it actually gives the same insert, so we can map using expressions. So we use this kind of expressions when we want to modify anything in the variable. So to make it dynamic, if we store the value directly in the variable and if we execute that's not a dynamic functionality, right? We have to update the variable value at runtime to make it dynamic. So that's actually a dynamic functionality. So that's where we actually use this expression. So expression, we actually update this expression with the dynamic values based on the parameters or anything. We can update this expression. We can actually use replace function or many other functions supports. Here you can check all the functions that we have in this section. You can use date, or you can use null values conversion, you can use operators, whichever function you want. That's based on your requirement. Okay, now let's click on OK. So we mapped SQL query with SQL statement source, and then so no need to map this one because we mapped there. Click OK. Now execute. Executed, right? So this is how we use expressions. So no need to pass any values to the direct SQL statement. It will be passed at runtime. So for expressions, we have, of course, we have many use cases. It's a more common task that we use in SSIS package or real-time scenarios. So to get familiar with using expressions, you have to practice more and more, and you have to get more scenarios like this, for example, if you want to generate an extract with the data appended on the extract file, or if you want to load data, let me show you an example here. Expressions. Now let's go to expressions. Now here what I want to do is I want to add another value in the values section and in the name section. So to do this, what I want to do, so I'm just take it as an example to just demonstrate to you. So let me replace. So what I want to do here is I want to add another column like ETL load date in sample table, and I want to pass get date, the current date, in the values section. So in order to do that, so I want to replace, the logic is I want to replace name closing brace with name comma load date and closing brace. So let me do that. Name closing brace, loads close, and then name comma load date. Okay, so it's trimmed as per our syntax. Now click OK and OK. Now execute this one. Executed. So now go back to here and execute our query. So okay, let's add load date as well. So you see it inserted the value as well. Okay, so this is how we use expressions in Execute SQL Task. So anything left? Let me check if we have any other use cases. And with connection managers, like we apply expressions in this expressions task, like it's not an expression task, it's a expressions in SQL Task, because we also have another task for expressions to define expressions explicitly like this. And like we define expressions in Execute SQL, like we define expressions in Execute SQL Task, we can also define this kind of expressions in all the tasks we have in SSIS package. For example, if you want to change the connection at runtime here or in the database source for each task in a workflow, like in the first task I want to use a database name of another server, then I can change it. I can use the variable here instead of the actual database name, and I can use properties. Clicking on F4 will give the properties. Here you can see expressions. You can change the connection strings like as you want here, and the database name using initial catalog. So expressions is a very important topic in a SSIS package. Okay, now let's open again to verify if I missed any other properties. Everything looks good. Okay, and one more thing, you can also execute a store procedure in Execute SQL Task execute statement. So instead of passing the value here, you can also um, pass store procedure, and also you can map parameters using parameter mapping by using question marks or as per the connection type, and you can do that as well. Okay, so these are the various use case scenarios that we use in Execute SQL Task.